You know, you talk, Erica, about his impact. I believe standing by right now, if we can bring her in, Susan Allen from George Mason University's Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. Miss Allen, can you talk about, I'm sure you've been watching the coverage. Just talk about the impact that the former president have and how that relates to some of the work you all do with your students at George Mason.
Thanks, Jumi and Erica. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I think the impact of President Carter is just going to be felt for generations to come. The work he did for peace was based on a sense that everyone can make a difference. And yes, he made a particular difference as a president and a former president, but he really understood that strong teams of people made up of folks who have different sorts of abilities, different sorts of connections, different positions in society, that everybody counts and everyone can make a difference. So what we're doing, it's here in the Washington area, the Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School at George Mason University has undergraduate, graduate certificate, master's students, PhD students, all studying peace and conflict resolution. And I think it's significant to have this school named for Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter because of the significant impact they've made. And I hope that we can continue training the next generation. We're doing research on peace and conflict resolution, teaching peace and conflict resolution, and doing peace and conflict resolution with their name on our school and their inspiration. I was at the Capitol on Tuesday evening. Stood outside in line in the cold, and so many people there who really wanted to pay respects as Jimmy Carter lay in state. And what really struck me there is how strongly the crowd, I mean, it really was a crowd of people willing to stand there, really believe in the ideals and the values that Jimmy Carter lived. It was a respectful, somber, apolitical crowd of people really respecting this person as a person.
And we talk about his work not just here in the United States of America, but globally, right? His footprint across the globe in peacemaking, in eradicating diseases. There are African children who bear his name, his fight to eradicate the Guinea disease, all of these things. I mean, his mark indelible in a number of generations globally.
Yeah, that's so true. I think, we think of Jimmy Carter as a peacemaker, but he really understood that peace is complex and involves people need to be healthy. People need, various, basic economic opportunities. And so in terms of bringing the health and the peace needs together, he negotiated the Guinea worm ceasefire. This was a ceasefire in Sudan that allowed people to come in and do work against the guinea worm while the civil war in Sudan had stopped. And that was really unique to have a ceasefire based on a health reason. But he really understood the synergies between health and peace work. He's really brought together the democratization, social and economic development, peace and health work all together, human rights. It's all interconnected. And he really understood that you can't do just one piece of paper and call that a peace agreement, that you need to really do the whole synergy of all these other parts that make a peace last.
And speaking of health, if you could speak to sort of the, I would say, a club that no one wants to willingly become a member of, cancer. And the current president knows this all too well in his family. The former President Carter, diagnosed with cancer, underwent treatment, recovered, remaining active well into his 90s, and also played an extensive role in the treatment of cancer. And it goes without saying with President Biden and his moonshot, the work and the efforts there. It's something that these two men very much have in common.
That's true. That's true. And yeah, Jimmy Carter, when he was, he had been diagnosed with melanoma, and then later I was, and I wrote to him and told him, I was going through this, and he sent me a personal note of encouragement. Yeah. So he was someone who, has done the policy level work and the, really emphasizing global and national initiatives to work on cancer treatment. And with any of his work, he's really made policy impact. And then he also keeps the personal touch too, and he knows that it's about the individual human being, that each of us need to be healthy and live live a life that lets us contribute. And I think he did his utmost to make this world a better place in all the ways he could.
I think there's so many people that have these personal moments. We had Maddie Stepanik's mom here, Dr. Stepanik, who spent some time, several years in Georgia, a neighbor, if you will, up the road from Plains. And she also was undergoing cancer treatment at the same time that the former president was. And a very personal moment that she shared with us, she said, he found out my treatment schedule and would call me while I was there and said, how's my sweetheart doing today? You can do this. And it was these, personal relationships that he had with whoever was in front of him at that moment was the most important person to him right then and there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah, he really, when I worked at the Carter Center in Atlanta many years ago, he had this way of just really focusing in. When we were briefing him on a particular project or asking his guidance on a specific question, that moment is all he focused on, and that particular decision, he really, he had a great presence.
Yeah. Ms. Allen, I'm wondering, as we take a look at the motorcade making its way down Pennsylvania Avenue towards the cathedral, your current students, I'm assuming their ages, but most of them, were not probably alive when President Carter was in office, depending on how old they are. But they know presidents these days to be a bit more of personalities, right? And so what are you hearing from your students in just the wake of the passing of President Carter and the legacy he leaves behind?
Well, a lot of our students, who were not alive during his presidency know his work through the peace work that he's done since then, and his leadership of the Carter Center and the synergies that our school, the Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School, have with the Carter Center. Some of our former students now work at the Carter Center. We've had a lot of synergies there. So our students do know the Carter work, particularly the work in the peace realm. We had a group of us going Tuesday night to stand in line and enter the Capitol and be part of paying respects. Several of our faculty, Aneshka Pachenska, Terrence Lyons, have worked on election observation missions with Carter. Chris Mitchell was part of the International Negotiation Network with Carter. So we've got multiple faculty who have connections with the Carter work, and multiple students and alumni as well. So I think obviously the family, and Carter was very much a family person, and his family is feeling this loss in a certain way. But as Jason Carter put it, the family shares Jimmy Carter with the whole world. And so there's a whole group of peacemakers that are really feeling this loss, but also feeling the inspiration of his life and all that he stood for.
Ms. Allen, we've had sort of a split screen going here, and we're dipping in and out of these pictures from the Washington National Cathedral. We've seen Chris Matthews in attendance, the former speechwriter for the former president, former Vice President Mike Pence, Supreme Court justices in attendance, Brett Kavanaugh we saw for a moment there as well inside the National Cathedral. So everybody's starting to file in and take their place. And it's interesting how these moments, even in personal family, let alone at this level, seem to bring people from all walks of life. And you can sort of put things behind you and extend a handshake for just this moment.
It's a story.
And Jimmy Carter knew how to do that in life and in death.
You're right. Susan Allen from the George Mason University Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.